September 13th, 11:47 p.m. 5 days building the story of her life. The story that would expose everything. And at the center, her mother's notebook, written 15 years ago, proving her mother knew the children would die. Jonathan Reeves's arrest Friday morning had shaken Harborview. Jonathan was respected, generous, the man everyone believed was building on his father's legacy, not hiding his crimes. But Becca knew an arrest wasn't enough. An arrest was the end of the police investigation. She needed the beginning of public truth. She needed a story that would force everyone to see what had really happened. Becca had arrived at the Gazette at 7 a.m., 3 hours before her usual time. Her father, Richard Walsh, editor of the paper for 30 years, was already there. "Did you sleep?" he asked, seeing his daughter walk in. "A few hours." A lie. She hadn't slept since Thursday. "Becca, Jonathan Reeves has been detained. Tom has evidence. The DA will prosecute." "You don't need to do this." "Yes, I do. Because if I don't, the story that will circulate is about a respectable businessman who committed an isolated crime. No one will know about 1972. No one will know about the 8 children. No one will know Jonathan spent 15 years protecting secrets of mass murder by negligence." Richard looked at his daughter with a mixture of pride and concern. "You're going to make powerful enemies." "I already did. Thursday, when I told the sheriff that Jonathan was lying about his alibi. Becca had started as a police reporter 3 years ago, covering petty crimes, burglaries, bar fights, car accidents. But she'd always wanted more. Wanted the stories that mattered. The stories that changed things. And when Bobby Sullivan appeared in Harborview, Becca felt something big was happening. She just didn't know how personal it would become. Becca spread out all the documents she'd collected over the last 5 days, from Sheriff Tom, copies of statements from Sarah Mitchell, David Chen and Father Patrick, each revealing a piece of the 1972 puzzle from Bobby Sullivan, the envelope he'd personally delivered Sunday night, 4 days before he died. Inside, photocopies of St. Michael's memos, ignored budgets, Polaroid photos of dangerous wiring from the Gazette archive, microfilm from 1972 showing original coverage of the fire. Tragedy in Boston. 8 children die in orphanage fire. Brief reporting, no deep investigation. And from Becca's personal file, her mother's notebook. Ellen Walsh had been a nurse at St. Michael's for only 6 months before the fire. She'd been hired in February 1972 to care for the orphanage infirmary. Minor injuries, fevers, basic medication administration. But Ellen had a habit of writing everything down. Medical observations, concerns about sanitary conditions, and eventually, suspicions about administrative irregularities. Becca had never read the notebook until now. Her mother had died when she was 12. Complications from severe burns suffered in the fire. Ellen had survived 3 months after that night, but pulmonary infections eventually took her. The notebook was kept in the Gazette archives because Ellen had tried to give it to journalists before she died. "Someone needs to know," she'd said. But no one had paid attention to a dying nurse talking about irregularities in Boston. Becca opened the notebook to the marked page. August 15th, 1972, 8 days before the fire. "Today I saw Father Reeves arguing with janitor Bobby about maintenance. Bobby insisted the electrical wiring was dangerous. Reeves said there were no funds. But yesterday I saw Reeves arriving in a new Cadillac. Where is the donation money?" August 18th. "Bobby showed me photos he took of the wiring in the basement. It's terrible. Exposed wires, melted insulation. He said he's reported it 3 times. I asked if we could take this to the diocese. Bobby is afraid of losing his job. So am I, but what if something happens? August 22nd, last entry before the fire, can't sleep. Keep thinking about those children sleeping up there. Bobby said he'll make one last attempt with Reeves tomorrow. If he doesn't act, Bobby will go to the diocese without permission. I'll go with him. Someone has to protect these children." Becca felt the weight of realization. Her mother hadn't just died trying to save children in the fire. She died because she was about to expose the truth. And if the fire wasn't an accident, if Jonathan Reeves had deliberately caused the fire to destroy evidence of his father's embezzlement, then Ellen Walsh wasn't just a victim of tragedy. She was a witness being silenced. "Mom," Becca whispered to the open notebook, "I'm going to finish what you started." "4 days before Jonathan's arrest. 2 days before Bobby Sullivan was found dead." Becca was closing the Gazette office when she saw a man waiting outside. Rebecca Walsh. "Who's asking?" "My name is Bobby Sullivan. I worked at St. Michael's, the orphanage where your mother—" He stopped, seeing her expression change. "Come in." Bobby and Becca talked for 2 hours that night. He told her everything, about the ignored memos, about trying to warn Reeves, about the night of the fire. And about Ellen Walsh. "Your mother was brave," Bobby said. "On August 22nd, she told me she'd go with me to the diocese to report Reeves. Didn't matter what happened to us. The children were more important. And then the fire happened the next day. Yes, and Ellen got trapped on the 2nd floor with the children. I saw her through the window. She was trying to get the smaller ones out before the fire reached them. Firefighters got her out, but the burns were too severe." Becca wiped tears discreetly. "Why are you telling me this now?" "After 15 years, because Richard Reeves died 2 months ago," Bobby answered. "The director. He died rich and respected, never paying. And I can't let that happen with Jonathan too." "Jonathan? The son? He was there the night of the fire. I saw him. He fled with documents, probably evidence of the embezzlement. And now, 15 years later, he's doing the same thing his father did, using money to buy silence and reputation." Bobby took an envelope from his backpack. "I gave copies to other people, fire survivors who are in Harborview, but you're a journalist. You can make this public in a way they can't." Becca took the envelope. "What do you want me to do?" "Investigate Jonathan Reeves. Find out where his money comes from. How he built a hardware empire in a small town. Who he's paying to keep his reputation clean. Because I suspect it's not just about protecting his father's legacy. It's about hiding his own crimes. Jonathan will try to stop me," Bobby said as he left. "He's already followed me, already threatened me subtly. That's why I gave copies to several people. If something happens to me, Bobby, if you're in danger, go to the police now. I can't, not yet. I need Sarah, David, and Patrick to confirm their stories first. I need solid testimonies. A few more days and I'll have everything." He stopped at the door. "Your mother died trying to protect those children. Don't let that death have been in vain. Expose the truth. Make the Reeves pay, father and son." It was the last time Becca saw Bobby Sullivan alive. In the 5 days since Bobby's death, Becca had worked obsessively. She had the 1972 evidence. She had the testimonies from Sarah, David, and Patrick. And now, with Jonathan detained, she had access to something crucial: financial records. Tom had shared information, not officially, but journalists and cops sometimes worked together when goals aligned. And Tom wanted Jonathan convicted as much as Becca wanted to expose the truth. Reeves Hardware and Electrical was founded in 1973, Becca told her father while organizing documents. 1 year after the fire, Jonathan was 26 years old. Where did the initial capital come from? Richard looked at the papers. "Is this in public records?" "It is. Incorporation filing lists initial investment of $50,000. A fortune in 1973. Source, family inheritance. But here's the interesting part." Becca showed another document. Richard Reeves, the father, only died in July 1987. So how did Jonathan receive an inheritance in 1973? "Unless," Becca continued, "Jonathan took money that wasn't his, money his father embezzled from St. Michael's before the fire. Money that was probably in that briefcase Jonathan carried out the night of the fire. You're saying Jonathan's business was built with money stolen from an orphanage?" "I'm saying I need to prove it, and I have an idea how." Becca picked up the phone and dialed a number she'd memorized. "Madame Bernard, this is Rebecca Walsh from the Harborview Gazette. I'm investigating St. Michael's Orphanage. Do you keep records of donations made to the orphanage between 1970 and 1972? The conversation lasted 20 minutes. When Becca hung up, she had confirmation. There were significant gaps in the 1971 to 72 donation records. Money coming in, but not appearing in official books. Exactly the kind of irregularity her mother had noticed. If you're enjoying this video, please click the like button so YouTube can share it with more people. And if you enjoy this type of video, please subscribe to our channel. Becca spent the afternoon at the library, reviewing 15 years of Harborview Gazette editions, looking for a pattern, a signature, and she found it. Reeves Hardware donates $5,000 for new playground, 1975. Jonathan Reeves sponsors elementary school renovation, 1978. Local businessman funds new hospital wing, 1982. Reeves Hardware offers scholarships for local students, 1985. Page after page, year after year. Jonathan Reeves, the generous benefactor, the pillar of the community. The son honoring his father's legacy through charity, but Becca now saw it differently. She saw a man buying reputation, ensuring no one questioned where the money came from, building armor of goodness to hide crime. Becca did the math. In the 15 years since founding the company, Jonathan had donated over $200,000 to local causes. Generous for a small-town businessman, but not impossible, except that public records of the company showed modest profits. Reeves Hardware was a solid business, but not extraordinary. Where was the extra money for such large donations coming from? The answer was in another pattern Becca discovered: municipal contracts. 76. Reeves Hardware wins electrical maintenance contract for all public schools. A 1979, contract renewed, expanded to municipal buildings. 183. Reeves now exclusive electrical equipment supplier for the town, each contract coming shortly after a significant donation. Each donation ensuring gratitude and loyalty from public officials. Monday morning, Becca did something audacious. She went to Mayor James Morrison's house. Morrison was 58 and had been in office for 12 years. He'd been one of the biggest beneficiaries of Jonathan's generosity. The school renovation where his wife was principal had been funded by Reeves. "Miss Walsh, it's Monday morning," Morrison said, opening the door, clearly irritated. "Mayor, I need 5 minutes. It's about Jonathan Reeves." Something changed in his expression. "Come in." Becca didn't waste time. "Mayor, Jonathan Reeves has been detained for murder. But I'm investigating something bigger. I want to know about the municipal contracts he's received over the last 15 years. Those contracts went through proper bidding process." They did. But Jonathan always won, even when he didn't have the lowest bid. "Why?" Morrison was silent. "And his donations," Becca continued. "They always came before the contracts, as if he knew generosity would be recognized." "Are you accusing me of something, Miss Walsh?" "No, I'm asking for the truth. Because if you know anything about Jonathan Reeves, anything that explains where this money comes from, and don't say it, you become complicit." Morrison took a deep breath. "Jonathan Reeves never asked me for anything directly. There was never an explicit deal, but there was an understanding. He helped the town helped him, mutually beneficial." "Beneficial to whom?" "To the children who died at St. Michael's 15 years ago because his father embezzled funds." Morrison looked genuinely shocked. "What are you talking about?" Becca opened her folder, showed Bobby's documents, the 1972 memos, photos of the wiring, ignored budgets. Jonathan's father stole from an orphanage, put profit above safety. 8 children died, and Jonathan used that stolen money to build his empire here. Every donation he made, every contract he won, it all comes from the blood of those children. Morrison held the documents with trembling hands. "I didn't know. You have to believe me, I didn't know." "You going to publish this?" Morrison asked. "Yes, the whole town needs to know who Jonathan Reeves really is." "You'll destroy a lot of people besides him, people who accepted his donations. Schools, hospital, families who received scholarships." "I won't destroy victims," Becca replied firmly. "I'll expose the system that allowed this, and I'll make sure blood money is returned, used to honor the memory of those 8 children, not to buy forgiveness for a murderer." Morrison nodded slowly. "What do you need from me?" "A statement, on the record, about the contracts, the donations, the tacit understanding, and if there's anything else you know about Jonathan Reeves's finances, accounts, properties, investments, I need to know now." Becca returned to the office with a box full of evidence. She had financial records, municipal contracts, witness statements. She had her mother's notebook, Bobby's documents, testimonies from Sarah, David, and Patrick. And she had one last piece of the puzzle, the medical examiner's report. Tom had called Saturday night. The full report came from the state ME. Bobby Sullivan is officially a homicide. Cranial trauma before drowning. Someone killed him and threw him in the water to look like an accident. It was the final confirmation. Jonathan Reeves wasn't just the heir to criminal negligence, he was a murderer. Becca started writing at 8 p.m. Monday and didn't stop until she was finished. The article was 4,000 words, much longer than anything the Gazette normally published. But this wasn't a normal story. Title: The Legacy of Blood, How Jonathan Reeves Built an Empire on 1972 Tragedy. Subtitle: 8 children died in fire. 15 years later, son of responsible director tried to silence only witness who could expose truth. She wrote about St. Michael's, the orphanage that should have protected children but became a death trap. About Richard Reeves embezzling funds while wiring deteriorated. About ignored memos, dismissed warnings, the courage of Bobby Sullivan and Ellen Walsh trying to force action. She wrote about the night of August 23, 1972, how the fire started exactly as Bobby had warned, how 8 children got trapped, how Jonathan Reeves was seen fleeing, not saving lives, but carrying documents. She wrote about the investigation that was covered up, diocese transferring priests, silencing witnesses, officially declaring it an accident. And she wrote about the 15 years that followed, how Jonathan used stolen money to build an empire, how he bought reputation through strategic donations, how he ensured loyalty through municipal contracts, how he lived a life of respect while the memory of 8 dead children was buried along with the truth. And in the final section, Becca wrote about Bobby Sullivan, the janitor who tried to save children in 1972 and returned 15 years later to save the truth. How he spent 3 days collecting testimonies, how he was murdered before he could deliver them to police, how Jonathan Reeves eliminated the last threat to his empire of lies. Bobby Sullivan died doing what should have been done in 1972, exposing the truth. He didn't live to see justice, but his testimony, preserved on microcassette left with Father Patrick Doyle, ensured the killer wouldn't escape. The 8 children who died at St. Michael's deserve to be named and remembered. Sarah O'Connor, Timothy Chen, Michael Brennan, Katie Morrison, Rachel Martinez, Emma Foster, Thomas Wright, Lily Nguyen. They didn't die in an accident. They died because people in positions of power chose profit over safety, silence over action. Jonathan Reeves is detained for the murder of Bobby Sullivan, but the true accusation is much larger. 15 years building a life on the grave of 8 children. 15 years buying forgiveness with blood money. 15 years hiding the crime that defines the Reeves family. This newspaper calls for the DA to prosecute Jonathan Reeves, not just for recent homicide, but for complicity in 1972 criminal negligence. Calls for funds donated by Reeves to be audited and returned for proper memorial. And calls for St. Michael's to be remembered not as forgotten tragedy, but as warning that silence in face of injustice makes us all complicit. Signed, Rebecca Walsh, Harbour View Gazette. Richard Walsh arrived at the office at 6 a.m. Tuesday. Becca was there waiting. "I'm done," she said, handing him the stack of pages. Richard read for 40 minutes without interruption. When he finished, he took off his glasses and wiped his eyes. "This will cause an earthquake. I know. We'll probably be sued. Everything here is verifiable. I have sources, documents, identified witnesses. Are you sure? Once we publish, there's no going back." Becca thought about her mother. Ellen. Walsh, the nurse who tried to do the right thing and died for it. Thought about Bobby Sullivan, murdered for threatening to expose the truth. Thought about the 8 children who never got a chance to grow up. I'm sure. Publish it in today's edition. The Tuesday edition of the Harbour View Gazette sold out in 3 hours. Becca's story was on page 1, with a photo of St. Michael's before the fire and photos of the 8 children who died. Respectful, but impossible to ignore. Within hours, larger newspapers started calling. Portland Press Herald wanted to reprint. Boston Globe sent a reporter to Harborview. TV networks wanted interviews. And at the county DA's office, additional charges against Jonathan Reeves were being prepared. Not just homicide, fraud, money laundering, complicity in historic criminal negligence. Becca was at the office when Tom called. "You caused hell, Walsh." That was the plan. DA is using your article as basis for additional charges. Jonathan's financial audit has already started, and the Portland Diocese opened internal investigation into the 1972 cover-up. And Jonathan, still detained. No bail. Arraignment this week and preliminary hearing in November. Thanks to your work, he'll spend the rest of his life in prison. That afternoon, Becca went to the cemetery for the first time in years. Ellen Walsh's grave. Died November 11, 1972 at 32 years old. "Mom," Becca said, placing a copy of the Gazette on the headstone. "You tried to expose the truth. They wouldn't let you. But I finished the work. Jonathan Reeves will pay. Richard Reeves may be dead, but his legacy is destroyed." And the 8 children, Sarah O'Connor, Timothy Chen, Michael Brennan, Katie Morrison, Rachel Martinez, Emma Foster, Thomas Wright, Lillian Nguyen, finally have justice. The wind carried away the newspaper pages, but the truth was already loose. There was no way to bury it again. Rebecca Walsh had arrived at the Harborview Gazette 3 years ago, wanting to write stories that mattered. And now she'd written the story of her life, the one that would change everything. Not just for Harborview, but for all the families of St. Michael's victims who'd waited 15 years for answers. Bobby Sullivan was dead, but his mission was accomplished. Through Sarah Mitchell, David Chen, Father Patrick Doyle, and now Rebecca Walsh, the truth had emerged. 4 witnesses, 4 perspectives, 1 indestructible truth. And in the next video, the last in this story, we'll discover what happened to Jonathan Reeves, the trial, the final revelations, and the answer to the question that haunted Harborview from day one. Who really was the stranger who died on the beach? And what did his death reveal about a town that thought it knew all its secrets? This was the 5th story in The Stranger, the story of Rebecca Walsh, the journalist who turned personal tragedy into public justice, the daughter who honored her mother's memory by exposing the truth she died trying to reveal. Some stories are about hiding, some about confessing. This one was about exposing. The next and the last was about facing. If you like this video, subscribe to the channel and share our video to help us spread our stories.